everybody, welcome back or welcome to the channel. Covering some Marvel Snap here. On this video, we're going to be talking about the top 10 beginner cards, or you might want to fall into like the pool 1 type, so it could apply to anybody who's playing for a little bit. So let's jump right in. So I'm using snap.fan to show the cards. I think this is a great site. I got a couple videos out there where I've highlighted this website. I think it's phenomenal. The filters for the cards, I like this site the best because you can put multiple filters in. So I would highly recommend that. You can see just above my head over here, I've got some filters. I've got starter, level 1, pool 1. I didn't go into pool 2 or pool 3. I think that for beginner purposes, we shouldn't focus on stuff like that. So, and even I didn't put some of the cost cards. And now I like to break these into a little bit into cost category. I've got like a 1 through 4 and then a 5s and then a 6s, because I mean, all of the 5s or a lot of 5s and a lot of 6s would be considered top 10, right? Because those cards are great, but realistically, you're not going to have more than 2 at most 6s in your hand, because you might have, you know, a card that you can guarantee to get on the last turn or on the river for any Hold'em fans out there. So let's focus on the cost levels 1 through 4. Again, if you're not familiar, cost is the little blue dot, how much energy it costs you. So the first card in this group that I like is Hawkeye. It tends to be something where it's a low cost. You're like, well, you know what? I know I'm going to play a card here next turn, so I'm going to get some extra points out of it. He's not great long-term, but he is a good beginner card. The next one that I sort of used to struggle with a little bit is Nightcrawler. But the more I found using him later, he gives you some flexibility and shifting around a little bit. And even some cards that don't make this list, like Angela, is decent. Like you can put Angela down and then a Nightcrawler and then move Nightcrawler, and Angela still gets the credit for having Nightcrawler laid there. So something to think about. Now, again, Angela doesn't make this list, but Nightcrawler does have some flexibility. And so for that purpose, I have him on there. Rocket, I should say, is an honorable mention. You can get some decent, but I don't like that guessing game of where someone might play, especially as a beginner. I think you don't want to necessarily mess with that. Maybe later on when you start getting a little bit used to where someone might play, I think it makes sense. Now, I don't have really any 2 cards on here, which is sort of weird. So I do want to at least mention, I mentioned Angela real quick. Medusa, these are honorable mention types. Sentinel as well, especially given one of the cards I'm going to mention later. And really this is about decks, but that's why I'm focusing on just individual cards now. Wolverine did get a nice boost later or early on, but again, unless you're playing a discard or destroy deck, it's not really going to affect you. Now, so the next card I've actually got officially in the ranking here, Cosmo. He is a great disruptor, super annoying, stopping those on reveal abilities. A lot of cards do have that. You can see on reveal destroy, on reveal get extra power, on reveal change, on reveal add, on reveal add. So Cosmo can really disrupt. Now, I don't like personally playing Cosmo in a lot of cards because it is somewhat limiting to yourself as well, but it's a worthy mention here in some of the top beginner cards. I do like a lot of these 3s, but again, they're specific for certain type of decks. I don't want to focus on that. So the 3 that really pop off here, Mr. Fantastic. He will be used a lot early game and for beginners to get additional points next to him, especially on locations that you can't play something on, or you can only play certain turns, or maybe you can't play certain turns, so you can get some extra points. I also like Morph a lot because this gives you the ability to copy something from the other your opponent's hand. Now, the problem with Morph is it can be anything. So there's a lot of RNG to it. So if there was a top, like if you were going to pull someone off this top 10 list, Morph would be one of them. Punisher, I also like quite a bit. He can get, when you know there's your opposing team is going to have 4 cards on the other side, he can really get stacked up on this, and then especially pair well with one of the 6 cards we'll get to later. In discard decks, I like Swordmaster, but again, discard moves, destroy decks, until you get a little used to the game, I'm not going to necessarily recommend some of that. Next up, while I think Wolfsbane and Enchantress are both good cards, for beginners specifically, I like JJ a little bit better, where again, you need to know not to play a card next hand here. So maybe it's turn 4 and you've already got 2 cards on a certain spot, then lay out JJ because you know in turn 5 you're going to go somewhere else. So I do like that. Khazar, I didn't put Khazar on this list, even though I do think he's a good card. But again, that's more with certain decks. Like, so if you've got a lot of ones in your deck, then Khazar. So I'm not, and I'm on this particular video, I'm focused on general overall top cards. Namor, and I'll get to Moon Girl in a second. But Namor, I think I just love him. You can drop him in a one single spot and get a big power boost out of him. And then if you get Atlantis as a location, you get even more power out of him. I think it's phenomenal. So I like him a lot. Now, I mentioned Wolfsbane briefly. I do like Wolfsbane quite a bit. It is a card that you can play later. Especially like if you've got 2 or 3 cards in a location, one of them being Nightcrawler. You can drop down Wolfsbane and then move Nightcrawler. So you could, you know, Angela, Nightcrawler, I don't know, maybe Punisher. You can put down Wolfsbane and then move Nightcrawler. So you're still getting a lot of those points. So I like that a lot. One of the things I want to mention is I do really like Moon Girl. And I really like White Queen or Emma Frost. Both of these cards add to your deck. So Moon Girl she's technically best with Devil Dinosaur, which we'll get to the 5s in a second, but she can still be a really good card on her own because she'll duplicate the first 3 cards. Well, really your whole hand, but really it tends to be the first 3 cards in your hand. So you want to keep those 3 cards. You want to notice what those 3 cards are and think about that if you've got a Moon Girl and you plan on playing it. If you've got a Devil Dinosaur in your hand and you got it early on, it's really nice to Moon Girl that and then drop a Devil Dinosaur turn 5 and a Dinosaur turn 6 if you can. White Queen, Emma Frost, I actually really like her a lot too. Somewhat similar to Moon Girl. She does pull the highest cost card in your opponent's hand. So not only do you get a good card, but you see what your opponent might be playing. I like White Queen a lot. She gets a lot of gameplay from right away into the game, easily into the mid game. Just a big fan of that. So now I want to focus on the 5s. These are sort of their own little category. There's no really necessarily bad 5s, but I never play Abomination. I love Devil Dinosaur. I think he's a great card, fantastic, but it's all about, again, decks. You've got to make sure you've got a lot of cards in your hand. So for that reason, if we're just talking top card, you know, like I said, Iron Man, fantastic. It doesn't matter what you've got. If you're trying to straight up double something, awesome. But you've got to have a lot of power in that location for Iron Man to be effective. And it is a high cost card at 5. Now, Claw, I resisted Claw for such a long time, but he is such a strong card. He can really, I mean, especially when you get some of the 6s we're going to talk about, he's an ongoing. So you get 4 points, which isn't bad. And you get 6 points in the location next to you. So if you're a little light on something, or if the location's locked down, Claw can get you out of that. Professor X, I actually don't have him on this list. It can be a little risky putting him out there because he can lock down a location, which is nice. But he's a high cost for low points, and you better hope your opponent didn't play a card at that same location. I do have Spider-Woman on this list. I found her to be one of the earliest 5 cost disruptors in the game. I still think she's pretty solid in that mid-tier level when you're getting into pool as you're shifting from pool 2 to pool 3. I really like her a lot. I don't play her a ton, but a nice thing, again, on reveal, which we'll get to with a turn 6 card in a second, she can really wreak havoc on your opponent. White Tiger is another card that I like Spider-Woman a little bit better than White Tiger, but White Tiger can shift things dramatically. But there's some RNG to it where White Tiger will throw a 7 power card somewhere else. So you've got to play White Tiger in a location where you already feel pretty good about, or you're going to feel good about last turn. Speaking of the 6 cards, a lot of people will play Hulk early on. I'm not a huge fan of Hulk. Yes, it's a nice power card. That's cool. But the cards that I like most out of this are the bottom 3 here. I like these 3: Odin, Onslaught, and Spectrum. Now, the reason is, and this is part of where it depends on the deck. Now, again, same thing with Apocalypse and a Heimdall. These are typically deck specific, where an Apocalypse, you're playing a discard hand. A Heimdall, you're playing a move hand or a move deck. These 3, technically they're similar, but they've got more versatility. So that, like, on reveal, Okay, Odin gives all of the on reveal cards that we talked about earlier. Like I said, Spider Woman and White Tiger. If you lay Odin on that location, they will do their thing again. Now, if you get the location Camertage where reveals happen twice, holy cow, it just cycles. It just cycles through, and you can get some massive points on that. So I really like Odin for that. And you can see on here all of the on reveals. A White Queen, you get some extra cards. Moon Girl, you get extra cards. JJ, I wouldn't plan on that because there's the next turn to it and you're already using it. Enchantress, not necessarily. But Wolfsbane, you get some more there. Morph, no, not necessarily. Maybe Groot or something like that. We won't go all the way into the ones, but you get the idea. So Odin, I really like, and I mean, even Medusa. Ironheart, which I don't have on this list, is a good card to eventually put into this deck if you're playing it on reveal, because it does let you do that again. So it cycles through. And again, Ironheart on Camertage and Odin, you just swipe through the points. You just swipe through them. Similar Onslaught, a little bit different, but ongoing. So all of the ongoings that we talked about before, with like Claw, maybe you played on Devil Dinosaur. Also, Mr. Fantastic. You can get Medusa on there. I like that to play around with. Captain America. Those are all decent cards that you can actually use Onslaught with and sort of get extra points for it. And I really sort of like that. Him and Claw are great. Now, again, this is beginner, but when you get Warpath eventually as well, who's also an ongoing, Onslaught is a lot of fun. So the last one here, Spectrum. She's probably the one I rank lowest out of this group because it does give all your ongoing cards +2, but they have to be ongoing. So all the ones that I was just mentioning and going through, they get +2 power. Not so bad. Maybe you can, add some extra points unexpectedly to somebody. Okay, fine. No, I probably like of this group Odin the best of these, because on reveal seems to be so strong early on. So top 10, is it, if you counted the cards, there's obviously more than 10 there. It's kind of a top 10 / tier list if you really look at it. And so I want to give you some ideas for the early pools, for the early beginner type players, what cards to look at. I did want to touch on some of the other cards just briefly so you can kind of understand why I might have skipped over them, but I didn't want to go through every single one of them. So I hope you find this video helpful. Again, trying to grow the channel. So if you want to share with your friends, families, neighbors, aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews, grandma, grandpas, appreciate it. This channel is specifically dedicated to Marvel Snap. So if you want to, please consider subscribing, hammer down like buttons, all that sort of thing. And until next time, I hope you have a wonderful day.